Hello and welcome to another episode of Rebel Rogue, where today I'm going to be painting what I think is possibly the best Christmas miniature. Stick around for the end, where I've got a little announcement to make. Rebel Rogue. So, this model is from the Maker's Cult, and it comes as a 3D printable STL file which you can download from Thingiverse. It is called Old King Swol, and here we see it. I quite like it. It is a larger scale model, so just bear that in mind. So I began by priming the model with Vallejo Black, and then we're going to wet blend the red coat on the model. For this we'll be using Vallejo's Heavy Red, Vallejo Citadel's Mephiston Red, and Vallejo Scarlet. I began by putting down a sort of preliminary coat of Mephiston Red. I would recommend leaving this to dry and then putting another coat down for the wet blend if you want suitable coverage. And now I begin adding in the shadow with Heavy Red. This is in all the areas where the light is not going to hit. For example, under the stomach and in the deepest recesses around the belt, and beginning to add in the highlight of Vallejo Scarlet. I do come back to this in another step because it is quite important that this is a good solid coat. So I do come back and sort it. Just as you go along, you can continue fixing different parts of the model by bringing back in the midtones, the shadows and the highlights, and wet blending them in. I'll have a video linked in the top right hand corner of the screen if you want to see how I wet blend. This is a new style of video where I don't record the narration live. Instead, I'm watching it back on Shotcut, my video editor, whilst also recording on Audacity through what I used to use of my headset, because my microphone I normally use isn't suitable, as it's got a lightning cable. Now I'm going to be painting the boots in Vallejo Black, and this is a sort of gloss black. I would recommend having a more matte black, but we do come to this in a later step to make it appear more matte and to give it a bit of variation. Painting this on both the boots and of course the belt. Now we're going along with Vallejo's Flat Earth, Vallejo's Khaki, and Vallejo Game Colour Bone White. We were painting these onto the bone parts of the model, for example the skull on the right side, and the skulls and antlers on the back. For this I'm using a size 1 Raphael brush, and I would recommend working in small areas so that the paint doesn't dry out. As with the other step, a preliminary layer of, for example, the midtone of khaki is a very good idea. You could use any triad of colours that you want to, but I would recommend having a sort of lighter brown, or a sort of khaki colour, and a bone or ivory colour. Enjoy the music. I made it myself, hopefully. I am recording this voiceover on Christmas Eve. I finished editing the video same day. Did a bit of editing yesterday, which is the 23rd. So I hope you enjoy. And for you people in the States, this might still be Christmas Eve when this comes out. Depending on where you are, if you're in Pacific Standard Time, it probably will still be Christmas Eve. But when this video comes out, it'll be Christmas Day. As before, we can repair it. We can come back and fix bits we're not happy with. Continue fixing bits that you are not happy with. For example, blends into the highlights, and make sure when you're applying the shadow colour, which in this case I'm doing second, I would recommend having wet paint still, and if it's not wet, just wetten it with a bit of more paint, another thin layer of paint, or water. As you can see, fixing bits you're not happy with as you go. Now we're going to apply Vallejo Model Colour Saddle Brown to all of these areas of skin on the model, using a size 1 Raphael brush. As before, this model, the link to this model will be in the description down below, as well as something very important. If you want to find out more about how I paint the skin, watch Age of Squidmars video on it. I love the method that he shows you. I do use a couple of colours that are officially like, what do you call them, equivalents, but pretty much it's the same colours. And I really do like the effect, and you'll see it long in the future. Now for the axes, because I think this is quite an interesting model, I'm painting the axes because I think they look like a bit like Angron, the Primarch. I'm painting them both as Gorechild and Gorefather, Angron's famous chain axes. For this we'll be using Vallejo's Terracotta, as you've saw before. Make sure that you avoid areas that you've already painted whilst moving your hands around, and just generally be careful. I'm really not looking forward to editing this audio. Okay, I'm going to have to listen back to it. Now we're using Royal Purple for the banding on the legs, and we'll be painting the axe handles in this colour as well. But I don't show this on camera because I choose to do this later on. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I haven't been able to highlight this with the blue-violet that I showed before, but unfortunately I couldn't. Make sure that you're only painting it on the main thicker bands of the pants. Trousers, I'm not American, so yeah, we'll be painting the middle in white rather than other colours. Now we're using Eshin Grey to paint all the furs on the model. Not on the beard, but just the furs that trim the model, including around the gloves and around the main coat. For this I'll be using a size 0 Raphael brush. I have thinned this with a little bit of water, 2 thin coats and all that. Make sure you do get a decent amount of opacity on the first coat, and I would recommend doing 2 coats. I think now is a very good time to mention, well, no it's not, Wolf Grey for the beard and the middle of the trousers. For this I'll be using a size 1 Raphael brush. Now is a good time to mention that in the description below you can find a link to both this model and to the Rebel Rogue 2020 mission pack, which is designed for Warhammer 40,000 but could easily be adapted for Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Middle-earth. It is a Google Doc, but I'm pretty sure that even if you're not signed in, you can still view it and download it as PDF. You'll find a way, I'm sure. But I hope you do enjoy those missions. I spent probably about an hour making them. I really do like Capture the Flag, it looks good. Now, moving back onto the tutorial, we'll be using we'll be using Citadel's Retrodrama to paint the power banks on the chain axes and the belt buckle. Now, with model metallic air gunmetal, we'll be painting the teeth on the chain axe and the pipes on the chain axe. I do like this colour. It is slightly more matte than, well, less shiny than other metallics, and you don't need to thin this. It has been pre-thinned for an airbrush, so it does flow very nicely. Moving on to the highlights, we are using Game Colour Stonewall Grey to do a light dry brush onto the furs. For this, we'll be using a knackered old flat brush that it was a round brush, but I bashed it flat. As you can see, it's not particularly good. So, we'll be using this. Make sure that you don't have any water on it. We want it to be quite dry. Make sure you, as with any dry brushing, rub all the paint off onto your surfaces and carefully dry brush onto the furs. Be careful to avoid areas you've already painted, but this is a very good way of getting some nice shadow into the model. We are now highlighting the skin in a very complicated way. We will be using a series of layers, beginning with a mix of saddle brown and dwarf skin. Then we'll be using just dwarf skin. Then dwarf skin mixed with flat flesh. Then flat flesh alone. Then we'll be using flat flesh mixed with a bit of light flesh, and then we'll be using a tiny highlight of light flesh. All of these mixes are in a 1:1 ratio. I'll be using a size 0 Raphael, and I've time-lapsed the entire thing. Sorry about my great big head being in the way. If you are interested into what I was listening at the time of time-lapse, because you can listen to things on iPhones whilst time-lapsing, I was listening to the Warhammer Community podcast of the Blood Bowl, the new Blood Bowl one, with Nick from Warhammer TV and the Wade Price, the host. I do enjoy it. It was a very enjoyable episode, and it kept me going whilst I time-lapsed all of this. As you can see, using the mixes gives you a nice transition with the layering technique, and I just find this really satisfying to watch. It's so satisfying. Oh, there we are. A bit of a stuttery transition. Hopefully it won't be there in the video. It does seem to be a bit stuttery, maybe it's struggling a bit. That's probably just from my end. If it's from your end, please let me know down in the comments. If you're still watching here, I'd like to thank you, and just remind you to smash that like button and subscribe if you're not already. Oh, and also, go check out the Rebel Rogue 2020 mission pack. There will be a video, probably later on Christmas Day, detailing it. We're now going to use the same overbrushing/dry brushing technique on the furs. We'll be using this with Vallejo's Ghost Grey instead, and this will bring it to a more white colour whilst still building up quite a bit of texture. I do hope this audio doesn't corrupt or my computer suddenly crash, otherwise that would ruin 14, 15, 16, 17 minutes of my day. Yeah. Now we're using Eschen Grey and Vallejo German Tank Crew to to sponge onto the boots using a small piece of packing foam, like the sort of packing foam you get in metal models, and we'll be using a pair of tweezers to do this, but you could just glue it to a cocktail stick or barbecue skewer. We begin by dipping the sponge in paint, then rubbing all the excess off on a towel and just carefully sponging onto the boots. We are also sponging onto the belt just to build up a bit of texture and add a bit of a highlight. As you can see, I've time-lapsed this again. You don't need to clean the brush between layers. As you can see, I've just changed layer, as far as I'm aware, into the German tank crew. Just again sponging this on. If you're not happy with it, come back in with some black. Now, using army painted dark tone, thinned with plenty of water, we are going to be washing this onto the beard. We thinned it because we don't want it to stain the wolf grey areas, such as the beard. It's mainly the beard and the inside of the trousers. We don't want staining, we just wanted to do recess shade. If you had something like contrast paint black Templar and thinned it with some contrast medium, that would be absolutely fine. Why am I saying Templar? It's Templar, it's from the northeast. But it's Templar. Anyway, when you get areas that are pooling, just dry your brush and use osmosis to remove the excess. You really don't want it staining. Now, using Vallejo Gaming Violet, we are going to, thinned with some water, we are going to be shading the purple areas of the model. Due to time constraints, I couldn't highlight these areas, and this will work similarly to contrast paint, so if you have a purple contrast paint, feel free to use that. Gaming is cheaper and easier to use and has far more applications, so if you've got it, or if you've got any sort of purple acrylic ink, it's fine. Now, using Gaming Brown, because I've run out of Adrox Earth Shade, painting it onto, thinned with a little bit of water, painting, actually no, not thinned, painting it all onto all of the gold area of the model. If you wanted a sort of cooler or older gold colour, you would paint this. You could paint a black wash, and if you wanted another colour similar, I have actually also painted this onto the metal. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this Christmas special, and I hope you take a minute of your time to check out the Rebel Road 2020 mission pack. And I will see you for the next video, which will be on New Year's Day, I believe. Yes, I think so. Anyway, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, check out the Facebook and Instagram, and goodbye.